By the late 1840s, government officials in Washington began removing Ojibwe people from their homeland by forcing them to walk over 150 miles to a new reservation, and the result was horrifying. The Ojibwe are one of the largest tribal populations in North America. Their history is rich in tradition, with many cultural aspects still thriving today, despite brutal and devastating attempts by federal governments to colonize them. After a nearly continuous fight for survival, their story is one of tragedy and conflict, but also triumph, perseverance, and incredible accomplishments. The Ojibwe are an Algonquin-speaking tribe that lives in parts of the US and Canada. They call themselves Anishinabeg, which means the true people or the original people, but that's not typically what other people call them. Other natives and some Europeans call them Ojibwe or Chippewa, which meant puckered up, probably because the Ojibwe traditionally wore moccasins with a puckering seam across the top. The Ojibwe language is Anishinaabe-Moan, a branch of the Algonquin language family, and it's quite beautiful and unique. However, many Ojibwe also speak English, especially the younger generation. Sadly, the number of fluent speakers has declined sharply, with mostly only elders being fluent today. In their language, the Ojibwe have no specific word for goodbye. The closest phrase would be Gigawabin Nagaj, meaning see you again. It implies that spirit keeps us connected to everything and is a more positive way of looking at things. The Ojibwe population is around 320,000 total, with close to 171,000 living in the US and about 160,000 in Canada. According to Ojibwe oral history and from recordings in birch bark scrolls, the Ojibwe originated from the mouth of the St. Lawrence River on the Atlantic coast of what is now Quebec. It is believed that the Ojibwe occupied the territories around the Great Lakes as early as the 1400s, expanding westward until the 1600s. They were the largest and most powerful of all the tribes inhabiting the Great Lakes regions of North America, and their spiritual version of their history is nothing short of incredible. Generations of oral history tells us that it all started when 7th-grade Migas, cowrie shells, appeared to them in the Wabanaki, land of the dawn, to teach them the Maid way of life. One of the Migas was too spiritually powerful and killed the people in the Wabanaki when they were in its presence. The 6 others stayed to teach, while one returned into the ocean. Before the 6 Migas returned to the ocean as well, they created something within the tribe that would make them stronger. The 6 Migas separated the group into 5 individual clans, known as Dotem or Totem, symbolized by animals: the bullhead, the echo maker or crane, the pintail duck, the tender or bear, and the little moose. Once the clans were established, the Migas left, but not long later one of them returned with a stark warning. One of the Migas appeared in a vision during one of the clan members' vision quests to relate a prophecy. It said that if the Anishinabeg did not move further west, they would not be able to keep their traditional ways alive because of the many new pale-skinned settlers who would arrive soon in the east. And they weren't wrong. As with many Native American tribes, white settlers eventually moved in on their territory and forcibly removed the Anishinabeg from their land and onto reservations. This caused the Anishinabeg to quickly migrate west and break into 6 groups, the Ojibwe being one of them. Today in the US, the Ojibwe live mostly on reservations in parts of Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, North Dakota, and Montana. In Canada, they live from western Quebec to eastern British Columbia. Their homeland still covers much of the Great Lakes regions and northern plains, and extends up into the subarctic and throughout the northeastern woodlands. The Ojibwe are the largest Native American group north of Mexico. They are one of the largest tribal populations among Native American peoples in the US, and in Canada they are the second largest First Nations population, surpassed only by the Cree. Migration has played a key role in safeguarding their population over the years, but it is not without its downfalls. While most Ojibwe inhabit large parts of the Great Lakes region, some have also migrated to the plains or areas further south. This has resulted in the need to adapt to different environmental conditions, which ultimately changes the way they dress, their art forms, and how they grow their food. Traditionally, their varied ways of life are truly remarkable. The Ojibwe are known for many of their age-old traditions, such as their birch bark canoes, birch bark scrolls, mining and trading copper, and their harvesting of wild rice and maple syrup. And their midwoven society is another major aspect. Also known as the Grand Medicine Society, is a religious society made up of spiritual advisors and healers who not only take care of the sick people, but also communicate with the supernatural world in ways that benefit the tribe. But that's not all they do. This society is well respected as the keeper of detailed and complex scrolls of events, oral history, songs, maps, and more. Many traditional ceremonies include the use of medicine bundles, which are a collection of sacred objects. In Ojibwe religion, tobacco, cedar, sage, and sweetgrass are considered sacred plants. Sweetgrass and tobacco rituals are practiced routinely, and cedar and sweetgrass are deemed to have purifying properties. The Ojibwe are extremely resourceful and knowledgeable. They are in tune with nature and are skilled at living off the land. Historically, the Ojibwe lived in a settled, as opposed to nomadic, lifestyle, relying on fishing, hunting, and cultivation for food. They use natural resources for pretty much everything, from food and clothing to shelter and tools. Traditionally, the Ojibwe dwelling has been in the wigwam. It was either a domed lodge or a pointed lodge, made of birch bark, juniper bark, and willow saplings. However, in the modern era, they look a little different. Today, most of the Ojibwe live in modern housing, but traditional structures are still used for special sites and events. While their culture has evolved a lot over the years, not every aspect of it has been modernized. The traditional Native American diet was seasonally dependent on fishing, hunting, foraging, and farming of produce and grains, particularly wild rice, beans, squash, corn, and potatoes. They foraged for berries and cherries, and they hunted for deer, beaver, moose, goose, duck, rabbit, and bear. And they had one particular sweet treat that helped give variety to their dishes. The Ojibwe territories are full of sugar maple trees, so they've always been, and still are, skilled maple syrup makers. They use it in a variety of ways for cooking and baking, and have a traditional way of making granulated sugar with it as well. Maple syrup is considered one of the sacred foods to the Ojibwe people. The Ojibwe people still have totems or clans. Clan membership passes through the male lineage from the father's clan, and it's still considered taboo to marry someone from the same clan. As mentioned, the Ojibwe clan system is patrilineal from the father's side. This means that children are considered born into the father's clan, and in recent times, this system has caused some serious concerns for the Ojibwe people. After their migration was well underway, and many Native Americans began meshing with Europeans, there were children being born to French and English fathers. Sadly, these children were considered outside the clan and Ojibwe society, unless adopted by an Ojibwe male. They were sometimes referred to as white because of their fathers, regardless if their mothers were Ojibwe, as they had no official place in the Ojibwe society, and the complexity doesn't stop there. Kinship in Ojibwe clans includes the immediate family as well as extended family. Basically, a brother and sister will also consider their cousins their siblings because they are all part of the same clan. The social structure of women was also complex in regards to mothers and aunts. Even so, all clan members were seen as close family, and therefore intermarriage was strictly forbidden. The 5 original clans were Bullhead, Crane, Duck, Bear, and Moose. The Crane totem was the most vocal among the Ojibwe, and the bear was the largest, so large that it was subdivided into body parts such as head, the ribs, and the feet. Each clan had certain responsibilities among the people. For the Ojibwe people, they had to marry a spouse from a different clan. And when it came time to choose a spouse, boys and girls had to take part in specific ceremonies and rituals in order to be considered eligible for marriage. Boys were eligible for marriage after doing a special ceremony called a vision quest. It involved 4 days of isolation in which they would fast, pray, and make offerings. The point of this quest was to find a guardian spirit to watch over them throughout their lives. A vision quest could sometimes occur as early as age 3 or 4, and were generally accomplished no later than puberty. Girls were eligible for marriage after they experienced their first menstrual cycle. During their cycle, they would be isolated away from the tribe in a separate hut. Girls didn't typically have a vision. If they did, it was considered a special blessing, and the girl was thought to have healing powers. Rituals are not the only unique part of an Ojibwe marriage, though. Marriages would often be arranged by older family members. When a family arranged a marriage for their daughter, it was usually for economic stability, and she was given as a form of payment for service. Elders of the clan carefully watched all the unmarried girls to ensure their purity. A man could also choose the girl he wishes to marry, but he had to prove himself first. If a man wanted to marry a girl, he had to hunt an animal and present it to her family. This was to prove that he could provide for his future bride. If the family approved, the girl was not allowed to turn down the proposal, even if she didn't like the guy. Traditional Ojibwe wedding ceremonies were extravagant. Women wore beautiful white dresses and white moccasins made from deer or elk skin and designed by the bride herself. Men wore black pants, a ribbon shirt, and moccasins. The event lasted 3 days, not including the days preparing in advance. The bride and groom had to choose 4 sponsors who must be elders. The sponsors would promise to help the couple throughout their marriage, giving guidance and wisdom. The bride was also required to bathe in a body of water, such as a river or lake. Bathing in the earth's natural waters is a symbolic act of being blessed by Mother Earth. After the wedding, the newlyweds would stay with the woman's parents for about a year. During this time, if they wanted to start a family, they would build their own lodge. If they didn't want to start a family, they would continue living with their parents. And while there weren't any honeymoons, the couple was given plenty of time alone. A woman is regarded as mature and responsible once she is married. Regardless of her age, she becomes responsible for cooking, cleaning, making baskets, drying out meats, harvesting food, and foraging berries. She is also responsible for childcare and overall family welfare. Once a man is married, he becomes responsible for providing a good livelihood for his new family. He is also responsible for hunting, providing supplies, and for keeping his wife happy. Their traditional tribal views of marriage can often be seen as atypical, and for one specific reason. In many indigenous tribes around the world, there is great importance put on men, with women often being less than. However, Ojibwe marriages do not follow suit. They are actually fairly equal, and spouses are treated like respected partners, even in the cases where a bride was purchased or when she lacked a choice in the matter. Traditionally, divorce was not allowed, regardless of what happened in the marriage. However, after 1450, it was more acceptable, but still fairly uncommon. In order to get a divorce, the sacred marriage blanket had to be divided, but then the reason for the divorce would decide what's next. If a man was disloyal in his marriage, traditionally, the women of the tribe would group together and viciously and publicly whip him. If a woman was disloyal, her possessions were taken away and she would be publicly shamed and snubbed by the tribe, which would ultimately brand her with a symbolic scarlet letter. The journey to the land of happiness where the dead reside takes 4 days, which is why it's important to get them on their way as soon as possible. In order for the spirit to embark on its journey, the body has to be prepared first. As you can imagine, this process must happen quickly, but it also has to be done properly. If the body cannot be buried the same day, guests and medicine men had to stay with the body and the family to help them mourn, while also singing songs and dancing throughout the night. Once the preparations were complete, the body would be placed in a rather interesting position. When a body was ready to be buried, it would be placed in an inflexed position, with their knees towards their chest. They then bury the body in a short grave and top it with a burial mound made of earth and stone. Many would put a spirit house over each mound. A historical burial mound would typically have a wooden marker inscribed with the person's clan sign. After the burial, a fire is lit and kept lit, and food is placed at the burial site to help nourish the spirit on its 4-day journey. The food will be refreshed daily for the full 4 days. But it doesn't end there. Much like modern-day funeral practices, the family still gets together to celebrate the life lost. Usually this takes place after the 4 days to celebrate the successful journey of their loved one. A large feast is held by the medicine man, and items are then exchanged. The deceased person's belongings are given away to other tribal members and family. The people chosen to receive those belongings are then required to trade in a new piece of clothing, which would be turned into a bundle. This bundle of new clothing, along with a large prepared meal, is then given to the closest relative, but they don't keep it for themselves. That person then divides the new clothing and gives it to other people they feel are worthy. Over the years, the Ojibwe fought countless land battles with their enemies, and by the end of the 18th century, they controlled nearly all of present-day Michigan, northern Wisconsin, and Minnesota, including most of the Red River area. They also controlled the entire northern shores of Lakes Huron and Superior on the Canadian side, extending westward to the Turtle Mountains of North Dakota. But their victories didn't last forever. The Ojibwe had a long-standing alliance with the French, and so they sided with them during the 7 Years' War. But when they lost, France was forced to cede its land claims to Britain, which then resulted in the Pontiac's War, where various Native American tribes fought to drive British soldiers out of the region. Ultimately, though, they lost and had to adjust to British colonial rule. The Ojibwe saw themselves as allies and not subordinates. Various tribes fighting with United States forces provided them with their most effective light troops, while the British needed indigenous allies to compensate for their numerical inferiority. While some treaties existed to keep peace, the ultimate goal of U.S. officials was to essentially remove them from their land, and they didn't give up. By the late 1840s, government officials in Washington began efforts to remove the Lake Superior Ojibwe people from their homeland. Officials had treaty payments changed to a place in Minnesota, which would require a journey of 150 miles by canoe and on foot. The result was horrifying. The Ojibwe people didn't stand a chance. They were unable to provide for themselves and were not given anything to supplement. They were cold, hungry, sick, and hurt, and over 400 people perished as a result. Chief Buffalo showed up in Washington with a petition, along with a long list of public supporters. The outrage that occurred after the Sandy Lake tragedy increased Ojibwe resistance to removal, and the bands effectively gained widespread public support. With all this, President Fillmore was backed into a corner. President Fillmore announced that the removal order would be canceled, and that another treaty would establish permanent reservations for the Ojibwe in Wisconsin. The Wisconsin Ojibwe's greatest victory in reclaiming their treaty-reserved rights came in 1983, when the federal courts affirmed that the two treaties guaranteed Wisconsin's Ojibwe's rights to hunt and fish on the land they ceded to the United States. The state of Wisconsin really didn't want the Ojibwe people to live off their own land, and tried desperately to challenge the court's decision. They went as far as offering millions of dollars to the Ojibwe people to relinquish their treaty rights, but they didn't give in. In Canada, the British agreed to many land cession treaties made with the Ojibwe, providing rights for continued hunting, fishing, and gathering of natural resources after land sales. Treaties in both Canada and the US continue to be discussed and adjusted even today, as many are vague and difficult to apply in modern times. Many rituals and ceremonies are still practiced, and clan memberships continue to take a traditional lineage, keeping strength in their community. That wraps up this journey. Thanks for watching Splash Travels. Like and subscribe to uncover more of the world's best kept secrets. And don't forget to dive into even more fascinating facts on our main page, Factinate.